Oh, this is delicious. You have no idea what's been happening behind the scenes, do you? While you were going about your day, making coffee, scrolling your phone, existing in what you thought was complete anonymity, someone was writing checks. Big checks. The kind with enough zeros to make accountants nervous. The kind that buys access to things that aren't supposed to be accessed. They hired professionals, not amateurs, not curious friends with too much time. No, they went to the people who dig for a living. The ones who unearth secrets for corporations, for lawyers, for people with enough money to want answers and enough paranoia to pay for them. And they pointed all of that firepower directly at you. They wanted dirt. They wanted ammunition. They wanted something, anything they could use to understand you, to predict you, to control you, to destroy you if necessary. They wanted to find the weakness, the crack, the skeleton rattling in some forgotten closet. They were so certain they'd find something, so absolutely convinced that beneath your surface there was rot they could expose. But here's what's keeping them awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling with bloodshot eyes and a cold sweat dampening their sheets. They found nothing they could use, and they found everything they couldn't explain. Let me paint you the picture of what happened when that investigator sat down with your file. They started confident, almost bored. They've done this hundreds of times, thousands maybe. People are predictable. People have patterns. People leave trails of dysfunction and bad decisions like breadcrumbs through a dark forest. So they started digging. Social media first. The easy stuff. Looking for complaints, for drama, for those late-night posts people make when they're broken and bleeding and desperate for someone to witness their pain. Nothing. They dug deeper. Financial records, employment history, looking for instability, for the gaps that suggest something was hidden, for the kind of chaos that makes a person controllable. Nothing they could weaponize. They interviewed people who knew you. Casual acquaintances, old colleagues. That person you dated briefly years ago. And this is where it started getting strange, because everyone had a different story. Not contradictory exactly, but fragmented, like they were each describing a different facet of something too complex to see whole. Some said you were the kindest person they'd ever met. Others said there was something about you that made them nervous, though they couldn't explain why. Some said you were quiet. Others said when you spoke, rooms went silent. Some said you seemed like you were barely surviving. Others said you seemed like you were operating on a completely different level than everyone around you. The investigator started taking notes, then stopped, then started again, then crossed everything out, because the picture wasn't forming. The profile wasn't crystallizing. You weren't fitting into any of the boxes they'd prepared. And for someone who makes their living reading people like open books, you were written in a language they'd never encountered. They went deeper, the kind of deep that costs extra, the kind that requires calling in favors and accessing databases that officially don't exist. They pulled records that should have painted a complete picture of who you are, where you've been, what you've done, and what they found made them set down their coffee and stare at the wall for a very long time. They found the traumas, the events that should have broken you, the losses that should have ended you, the betrayals that statistically, psychologically should have turned you into a shattered shell of a human being. They found the moments where by every metric they knew, you should have collapsed, should have given up, should have become another cautionary tale of someone who couldn't handle what life threw at them. But then they looked at the timeline. They looked at what came after. And that's when the confusion became something closer to fear. Because you didn't collapse. You didn't shatter. You absorbed impacts that would have destroyed entire family lines, and you just kept moving. You walked through fires that should have left nothing but ash, and somehow came out the other side, still breathing, still functioning, still building. The investigator called their client that night. The person who paid all that money expecting ammunition. And the conversation was short. "I don't know what you wanted me to find," they said, "but what I found doesn't make sense. This person should be broken. They should be institutionalized. They should be dead. But they're not. They're just living their life like nothing happened. And I don't have an explanation for that." You want to know what really unsettled them? It wasn't the trauma you survived. Lots of people survive trauma. It was what you became afterward. They traced your trajectory. They mapped your evolution. And they noticed something that made their professional detachment start to crack. You got stronger. Not despite what happened to you, but almost because of it. Like you were metabolizing poison and converting it into something else entirely. Like each devastation was just another ingredient in some alchemical process they couldn't understand. They looked at who you were before, and they looked at who you are now. And the distance between those 2 points shouldn't be possible. Not without help, not without resources, not without the kind of support systems that their research confirmed you never had. You did it alone. In the dark, without witnesses, without validation, without anyone telling you it was going to be okay. And that's what terrifies them. Because if you can survive that, if you can transform that kind of pain into whatever the hell you've become, then what exactly are they dealing with? What category do you fit in? What playbook applies? None. That's the answer that's keeping them awake. Absolutely none. Let's talk about why someone paid to investigate you in the first place. Because that's not normal behavior. Normal people don't write 5-figure checks to dig into someone's past. Normal people don't hire professionals to build dossiers on individuals who haven't committed any crime. No. The kind of person who does that is either afraid of you or obsessed with you. Sometimes both. They sense something. Maybe they couldn't name it. Maybe they still can't. But something about you triggered alarms in their nervous system. Something about the way you carry yourself, the way you don't react when you should, the way you seem to know things you shouldn't know. They told themselves it was suspicion. They told themselves they were being smart, being careful, protecting themselves or their interests. But the truth is simpler and uglier. They were intimidated, and they couldn't admit it. So instead of facing that feeling, instead of acknowledging that you made them feel small or exposed or outmatched, they threw money at the problem. They hired someone to find proof that you were nothing special, that you were fraudulent, that beneath the surface you were just as weak and compromised as everyone else. They needed that proof. Their ego demanded it. And now they're choking on the absence of it. The investigator's report sits on their desk now. They've read it multiple times, hoping to find something they missed, something that explains you, something that makes you less threatening in their mind. But every time they read it, they feel worse. Because the report doesn't describe a person with weaknesses they can exploit. It describes something else entirely. It describes someone who shouldn't exist. Someone who took damage that ends bloodlines and converted it into fuel. Someone who was isolated, abandoned, betrayed at the deepest levels, and instead of becoming bitter, became dangerous in a way that doesn't announce itself. The report notes your patience. The investigator highlighted it specifically. They said they've never seen someone take hits like you've taken and not swing back wildly. They said your restraint alone is concerning because it suggests you're not reacting emotionally. It suggests you're calculating. It suggests you're waiting. And people who wait, people who don't explode when they should, people who absorb and process and plan, those are the ones you can't predict. Those are the ones who move in silence until suddenly they don't. And by then it's too late. Here's what they were hoping to find. They wanted evidence of instability, proof that you crack under pressure. Examples of you making stupid decisions when emotional. Something, anything, that showed you could be rattled. Instead, they found story after story of you being rattled and not showing it, of crises happening around you while you remained the only calm thing in the chaos, of situations that should have provoked screaming matches or public breakdowns and you just going quiet. That silence, your silence, it's in the report multiple times. The investigator couldn't figure out what it meant. Were you suppressing? Were you dissociating? Were you simply too damaged to feel anymore? They consulted with a psychologist. Off the record, showed them the profile they'd built. The psychologist was quiet for a long time. Then they said something that the investigator included in their final notes, almost reluctantly. This person isn't suppressing emotion. They've transcended the need to perform it. They feel everything, probably more than most people, but they've learned that showing it gives others power, so they don't. That's not damage, that's evolution. And honestly, it's the kind of psychological development that usually requires decades of intensive work. For them to have achieved it through pure survival, they're operating at a level most people will never access. The person who paid for this investigation didn't like that answer. Didn't like it at all. They tried one more thing. A last desperate attempt to find something usable. They sent someone to interact with you directly. Not obviously, just a chance encounter. A conversation that seemed random, but was carefully engineered to probe your defenses. And this is where the report gets interesting. Because the person they sent, a professional at reading people, at extracting information through casual-seeming conversation, they came back shaken, not because you said anything threatening, not because you were hostile or aggressive or obviously guarded. They came back shaken because of your eyes. They said it was like being looked through, like you saw past every layer of their cover story, past the casual questions, past the manufactured friendliness. They said you smiled at them at one point, and the smile was warm, but the eyes behind it were running calculations they couldn't follow. They said they felt like prey pretending to be a predator who had just locked eyes with the actual predator. And they quit the assignment, refunded their fee, said some jobs weren't worth it. So here's where we are now. Someone paid a small fortune to investigate you, to find your weaknesses, to build a case against you, or a weapon to use against you, or at minimum, an explanation for why you unsettle them so much. And they got a report that basically says you're an anomaly, that you've survived things that end people and came out stronger, that you process the world in ways that can't be easily mapped, that your silence isn't empty, it's full of something they can't identify, that your patience isn't passive, it's predatory. They're not sleeping, they're checking their locks. They're wondering if you know, If somehow, impossibly, you're aware that they paid to have you investigated because the report mentioned something else, something that made them go cold. It mentioned your pattern recognition, your ability to notice things that others miss, your almost supernatural awareness of when something in your environment has shifted, and now they're wondering. Every time you look in their direction, every time you seem to pause for a moment too long, every time you smile, that smile that reaches your mouth but does something different with your eyes, they're wondering if you've known all along, if you let the investigation happen, if you were aware of every probe, every interview, every background check, and simply chose not to react. Because that would be worse, wouldn't it? That would mean you're not just impossible to understand. That would mean you're playing a game they didn't even know existed. Here's what I want you to understand about this situation. You didn't do anything. You didn't try to be mysterious. You didn't cultivate an image of danger. You just survived. You just kept going when everything said you should stop. You just processed pain that would have broken others and came out the other side still standing. And that, your mere existence, your refusal to be destroyed, your quiet transformation in the dark, that's what made someone pay money to investigate you. That's how powerful your survival is. That's how threatening your resilience appears to people who have never been tested like you've been tested. They look at you and they see something they can't explain, something their money can't buy, something their hired professionals can't decode. They see someone who's been to hell and didn't come back angry or bitter or broken. They see someone who's been to hell and came back quiet. And that quiet, that stillness, that absence of the reaction they expect, it keeps them awake at night. Because they don't know what you're going to do. They don't know what you're capable of. They don't know if you're planning something or processing something or simply existing beyond their comprehension. All they know is that they spent a lot of money trying to figure you out, and all they got was more questions. And a growing suspicion that maybe, just maybe, they made a mistake drawing your attention. Even if you didn't notice, even if you're not aware, even if you're just living your life, they'll never be sure. And that uncertainty, that inability to predict or control or understand you, it's going to eat at them for a very long time. So sleep well tonight. Really well. Because someone out there can't. Someone out there is staring at a report about you that reads like a warning label they didn't know how to interpret. Someone out there is realizing that the person they thought they could investigate, understand, and ultimately handle is something else entirely. They paid to find your weakness. They found your strength instead. They paid to expose your secrets. They discovered you don't have the kind they can use. They paid for answers. They got a mystery that only deepens the more they dig. And you magnificent anomaly, you didn't even have to do anything. You just had to be exactly what you are. Someone who survived the unsurvivable. Someone who turned pain into power without advertising it. Someone who walks through the world looking normal while carrying something that makes investigators quit and clients lose sleep. That's what you are now. That's what you've become. And they're only just beginning to understand how much trouble that puts them in. You feel it, don't you? That weight on your back that doesn't make sense. That resistance in your life that seems orchestrated. That pattern of things falling apart right when they were about to come together. You thought it was bad luck. You thought it was karma. You thought maybe, just maybe, the universe had something against you. But what if I told you it wasn't the universe? What if I told you it was something far more calculated, far more intentional, far more terrified of what you're becoming? Someone powerful. Just put a bounty on your potential. And no, I'm not being dramatic. I'm not speaking in metaphors. I'm telling you exactly what's happening in spaces you'll never be invited to, in conversations you'll never hear, in rooms where your name is spoken with a mixture of fear and urgency. They're not trying to destroy you because you're weak. They're trying to destroy you because they've seen what you'll become if they don't. Let that satisfying truth sink into your bones. See, most people think opposition comes from being disliked. They think enemies form because of conflict, because of history, because of something you did wrong. But that's not your story, is it? Your opposition came out of nowhere. People who had no reason to hate you suddenly hated you. Doors that should have opened slammed shut. Opportunities that were yours evaporated like they were never there. And you've been driving yourself crazy trying to understand why. Here's why. Someone saw your trajectory before you did. Someone with resources, with connections, with the ability to move chess pieces you didn't even know were on the board. They ran the numbers on your potential. They calculated what happens if you're allowed to grow unchecked, unsuppressed, unbroken. And the results terrified them so deeply that they made a decision right then and there. This one has to be stopped. Not slowed down, stopped. You weren't supposed to know this. You were supposed to internalize all that failure, all that rejection, all that inexplicable resistance, and conclude that you just weren't good enough. That's the cleanest outcome for them. When the target blames themselves, when the target gives up from the inside, when the target does the work of destruction for them. That's the ideal scenario, but you didn't break. And that's when the panic started. Let me paint you a picture of what happened. Somewhere, at some point, you came across someone's radar. Maybe it was something you said. Maybe it was something you created. Maybe it was just the way you carried yourself in a room full of people who had already accepted their cages. You stood out. Not because you were trying to stand out, but because you couldn't help it. Your frequency was different. Your energy was different. The way you processed the world was different. And someone noticed. Someone who understood exactly what that difference meant in the long run. See, there are people in this world who have made careers, fortunes, entire legacies out of identifying potential before it becomes power. They're talent scouts for the dark side. They look for the ones who haven't realized what they are yet. The ones who are still confused about why life feels so hard. The ones who are still blaming themselves for resistance that was manufactured. They found you, and they got scared. Because when they analyzed you, when they really looked at the raw material of who you are and what you're capable of becoming, they saw something that made their blood run cold. They saw threat. They saw disruption. They saw the kind of rise that would expose their fragile systems, their carefully maintained hierarchies, their illusions of permanent power. They saw you sitting in positions they currently occupy. They saw you influencing people they currently control. They saw you building things that would make their empires obsolete. And they saw it happening not in some distant future, but soon, sooner than they were comfortable with. So they did what powerful cowards always do. They didn't confront you directly. That would be too risky. That would give you something to fight against, something to push back on, something that would only fuel your fire. No. They went subtle. They went invisible. They went after the foundation instead of the building. They started removing opportunities before you even knew they existed. They started poisoning relationships before they could bloom. They started creating obstacles that looked like bad luck, felt like cosmic punishment, seemed like proof that you just weren't meant to succeed. And the worst part? It almost worked. You almost believed it. You almost accepted that maybe you were the problem. Maybe your dreams were too big. Maybe your ambitions were unrealistic. Maybe you should just settle, just accept, just become another face in the crowd of people who gave up on themselves. But something wouldn't let you. Something deep in your gut kept whispering that this didn't make sense, that the math wasn't mathing, that the level of resistance you were facing didn't match the threat you supposedly posed. You weren't trying to conquer the world. You were just trying to be yourself. You were just trying to grow. You were just trying to become. So why was everything fighting so hard against you? Now you know. You were never fighting bad luck. You were fighting a bounty, a contract taken out on your future by someone who saw that future more clearly than you did. Someone who understood that if you were allowed to bloom, their garden would wither in your shadow. They tried to bury you before you knew you were a seed. But seeds don't stay buried. They use the dirt as fuel. They use the pressure as direction. They use the darkness as motivation to reach toward light. And that's exactly what you've been doing, even when you didn't understand why it was so hard. You've been growing in conditions designed to kill you. And that growth has them terrified. Because here's what they didn't account for. Here's the variable they couldn't factor into their calculations. They assumed pressure would break you. They assumed isolation would weaken you. They assumed repeated failure would convince you to quit. That's how it works with most people. That's the playbook that succeeded 1,000 times before. But you're not most people. Every obstacle they put in your path became training. Every door they closed became motivation to build your own. Every relationship they poisoned became a lesson in discernment. Every failure they engineered became fuel for a fire they can't extinguish. They tried to starve you out, and you learned to survive on nothing. They tried to isolate you, and you became comfortable in solitude. They tried to break your spirit, and you discovered a strength you didn't know you had. Every weapon they used against you became a tool in your arsenal. And now they're watching you rise, despite everything they've done. Now they're seeing you adapt, evolve, overcome in ways their models didn't predict. Now they're realizing that the bounty they put on your potential might have been the worst investment they ever made. Because instead of destroying you, they forged you. Instead of eliminating the threat, they made it stronger. Instead of snuffing out your flame, they taught you how to burn without oxygen. You want to know the funniest part? They can't stop now. They've committed too much. They've invested too many resources, burned too many bridges, exposed too many of their own vulnerabilities, trying to take you down. If they stop now, if they let you rise, you'll eventually discover what they did. You'll trace the patterns back to their source. You'll understand who was behind every closed door, every sabotaged opportunity, every inexplicable failure. And then you'll know exactly who to thank for making you unbreakable. So they have to keep going. They have to double down. They have to throw everything they have at stopping a force they should have left alone. And every attack makes you sharper. Every obstacle makes you smarter. Every setback makes you more determined. They created the very monster they were trying to prevent. Beautiful, isn't it? The people around you have no idea what they're witnessing. They see someone struggling, someone facing unusual resistance, someone who can't seem to catch a break. They don't understand that they're watching a war. They don't see the invisible battles being fought over your future. They don't comprehend that forces beyond their imagination have decided you're too dangerous to let succeed. But you know now. And that knowledge changes everything. Because once you understand that your struggle isn't personal failure, but strategic opposition, everything shifts. You stop blaming yourself for outcomes that were manufactured. You stop internalizing resistance that was engineered. You stop questioning your worth based on results that were sabotaged. You start seeing clearly. Those rejections weren't judgments of your ability. They were protections of someone else's territory. Those failed relationships weren't evidence of your unworthiness. They were casualties of interference you couldn't see. Those missed opportunities weren't signs that you weren't ready. They were signs that someone needed you to stay small. Every single thing that made you doubt yourself was a strategic operation designed to make you doubt yourself, and you almost fell for it. But here's the thing about bounties. They don't last forever. Resources run out. Attention shifts. New threats emerge. And the person or people who've been investing in your destruction, they're getting tired. They're getting desperate. They're making mistakes they wouldn't have made before because they can't understand why you're still standing. You should have broken by now. You should have given up by now. You should have accepted your smallness by now. But you didn't. And every day you continue to exist, to push, to grow, to believe in something they tried to murder. That's another day their investment fails. That's another day their bounty goes uncollected. That's another day they have to look at reports that show you're still climbing despite everything they've thrown at you. You're becoming their nightmare. All not through revenge, not through confrontation, not through any action taken against them directly. Just through the simple, infuriating act of refusing to die. Just through the audacity of continuing to become what they feared you'd become. Just through the unforgivable sin of surviving their assassination attempt on your potential. And the closer you get to your breakthrough, the more desperate they become. You'll start noticing it now that you know what to look for. The attacks will intensify. The obstacles will multiply. The voices telling you to give up will get louder. That's not evidence that you're losing. That's evidence that you're winning. That's evidence that everything they've done is failing. That's evidence that the bounty they placed on your potential is about to expire. Worthless. They're throwing everything at you because they know they're running out of time. Your moment is approaching. That thing you've been building toward, that person you've been becoming, that breakthrough you've been working for, it's closer than it's ever been, and they can feel it. They can sense that their window of opportunity to stop you is closing. They can see the momentum building despite their best efforts. So expect resistance, expect chaos. Expect everything to feel like it's falling apart right before it comes together. That's not the universe punishing you. That's someone powerful making their final desperate attempt to collect on a bounty they never should have placed. That's the last gasp of opposition before your inevitable rise. That's the darkest hour that always comes before dawn. And when you break through, when you finally become what they spent years trying to prevent, when you step into the power they saw in you before you saw it yourself, remember this moment. Remember what it felt like to fight invisible enemies. Remember the confusion, the doubt, the inexplicable resistance that almost broke you, because you'll want to tell your story someday. You'll want people to understand that success wasn't handed to you, that every single inch was fought for against forces most people don't believe exist, that you didn't just climb a mountain, You climbed a mountain while people were throwing rocks at you from above, while others were pulling at your ankles from below, while the very ground beneath you was being sabotaged, and you made it anyway. That's the story. They never wanted you to be able to tell. That's the testimony they tried to prevent. That's the proof that their power was never as absolute as they needed it to be. You're going to win, not because you're lucky, not because you're chosen, not because the universe owes you anything, but because someone saw your potential and decided it was worth destroying. And that tells you everything you need to know about what you're capable of becoming. The bounty on your potential is the highest compliment you've ever received. It means you matter. It means you're a threat. It means your existence alone is enough to worry people with resources, connections, power. It means you're not crazy for feeling like something was working against you. It means your instincts were right all along. And it means you're about to become exactly what they feared. So let them watch. Let them strategize. Let them throw their final weapons at a target that refuses to fall. Let them exhaust themselves trying to stop someone who's learned to grow in hostile conditions. You're not just surviving their bounty. You're using it as fuel. Every attack becomes evidence of your importance. Every obstacle becomes proof of your potential. Every setback becomes confirmation that you're on the right path. Because nobodies don't get hunted. Irrelevant people don't attract coordinated opposition. Small threats don't require expensive bounties. You got their attention. Now make sure it was worth their investment. Rise so high they can't ignore what they failed to stop. Succeed so visibly that their failure becomes public record. Become so undeniably powerful that everyone who ever helped them will wish they'd chosen your side instead. The bounty on your potential was supposed to end you. Make it the greatest miscalculation they ever made. They're terrified of what you'll become? Good. Show them their fear was justified, because you're not just going to become what they feared. You're going to become worse. You're going to become the version of yourself that exists, because they tried to stop you. The version that's been hardened by their attacks, sharpened by their opposition, forged in the fire of their resistance. They could have left you alone. They could have let you grow naturally, peacefully, without interference. You probably would have been successful, but manageable, powerful, but within parameters they could handle. But they didn't. They tried to destroy you. And in doing so, they created something they have absolutely no protocol for. Something their models never predicted. Something that's been through conditions that break normal people and came out the other side with a smile. The bounty hunters are about to become the hunted. Not because you'll go after them. You won't need to. But because your success will expose their failure. Your rise will highlight their desperate, unsuccessful attempts to keep you down. Your victory will become their defeat. Not through anything you do to them, but simply through the undeniable fact that you made it. And that's the sweetest revenge of all. Not destruction. Just success. Not confrontation. Just elevation. Not war. Just winning. The person who put a bounty on your potential made a bet against your future. They wagered their resources on your failure. They invested in your collapse. And they're about to lose everything. Because you're still here, still fighting, still growing, still becoming. And nothing they do can stop what's already in motion. The bounty expires worthless. Your potential becomes reality. And they have to watch it happen, knowing they spent years and resources trying to prevent exactly what they're witnessing, knowing that every attack only made you stronger, knowing that the threat they identified was real and they had their chance to stop it and they failed. You're about to become their greatest failure. And honestly, you should thank them. Because without their opposition, you never would have discovered what you're truly capable of. Without their resistance, you never would have developed this level of strength. Without their bounty, you never would have become the thing that makes powerful people lose sleep. They meant to destroy you. They made you legendary. Instead, now go prove them right to be afraid.